Hello, everyone. I have here with me today Steve Fletcher from Low Country Local First. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing great, Christy. Thank you for having me on. This is awesome.
It's my pleasure. I'm really happy to shed light on the work that you do. So let's jump right into it. Low Country Local First advances economic prosperity and local ownership through innovative and inclusive initiatives that build your community's wealth and well being. Can you tell us more about how Low Country Local First came to be?
Yes, that was a perfect summation of who we are, what we do. We are a local economic development nonprofit that started, I think 15 going on 16 years ago now, here in the low country of South Carolina, which is essentially an amalgamation of 11 counties here in South Carolina, most of which are coastal. So we're based as an organization right here in Charleston, downtown Charleston on the peninsula, but our constituents and the people whose lives we hope to positively impact, they live throughout South Carolina. So we started here in South Carolina, in Charleston to be specific, again, about 15 or 16 years ago. Our founder, Jamie Haley, sort of, as an entrepreneur herself, was able to identify areas of the local independent business ecosystem here in Charleston that weren't really being celebrated a lot. And so I'll talk a lot about the local independent business ecosystem. I'll talk a lot about localism and how folks can be activists for their local businesses, their mom and pop shops. Our founder, Jamie Haley, 15 years ago, was in touch with a lot of other local first organizations because we didn't have one yet here in Charleston. And she decided, again, as a former business owner herself and as someone who was really well connected with the community, thought we've got a lot of cool local businesses here, but the community doesn't necessarily A, know who they are, or B, know why they should intentionally patronize them, maybe sometimes over some of the larger, more corporate behemoth businesses and companies. So she started it, and it has grown from a team of like one or two to now we've got like 9 or 10. We've got a bunch of partnerships with governments and municipalities, other nonprofits. We've expanded to farming and agriculture and business and disadvantaged nascent stage business owners of color. And we've got programs that support all of those different things. So yeah, we started a while ago, but right here in Charleston, South Carolina. And that was probably a way longer answer than you wanted. So sorry.
No, that was perfect. And I really love the backstory. And I'm glad that you specified where you are, who you
Mm.
serve, and how this all came to be. No, that was great. So, what sets you apart, you say, is that you develop innovative models for sustainable and equitable local economies. Can you tell us more about the importance of investing in your local business culture in this way?
Yes. There are many reasons why it's important for folks, whether they live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Sacramento, California, or Charleston, South Carolina, or somewhere else across the globe, to consider shopping, buying, and eating from local sources, restaurants, shops, retailers, and farmers. Their top of mind right now is the environmental impact. I just spoke with a gentleman here from the Charleston Climate Coalition about how we can work more closely with them to remind folks locally why their carbon footprint is lower when they decide to maybe shop at a Site C Coffee, which is a local coffee shop here, over a Starbucks. And I just want to, before I go too deeply into this world of like local first and pushing for local businesses, I do want to know folks listening in who love their Starbucks or, go to Walmart once in a while, like, I get it. Like, there are a lot of options out there. Everyone's in their own unique situation and coming at their purchasing decisions from their own unique perspective. And there are obstacles for people, maybe based on where they live or what they have access to or what sorts of products they need. So I'm not trying to shame anyone who goes to a non-local business over a local business. I'm just here to encourage people to consider some alternative shopping behaviors based on the sorts of positive impacts they may want to have in their own life and in the life of their neighbors and their families and their community. So another thing we've been looking at recently, you've asked about sort of what equitable, innovative solutions we've come up with and that we support and proffer here at LLF, which is Low Country Local First. Another would be a program called Good Enterprises. So I think a lot of local first organizations, and by local first organization, again, I just mean any nonprofit, usually in the US, there's about 20 or 30 of them right now. We are one of them at Low Country Local First. Any organization that's pushing for citizens to think meaningfully about how they can interact economically with their local business or agricultural ecosystem. That sounds very esoteric. I can definitely break it down for you all, but one new kind of emerging, sort of thing that people are looking at in these local first organizations is how we can make sure that our local independent business ecosystem is really diverse, right? So we're only as robust and dynamic as a community as we are diverse in a lot of ways. And we want our business ecosystem, so our system of local businesses, to be representative of our larger community. That means we don't want it to be here in Charleston for a long time. LLF's business directory was a bunch of businesses that were led by white men predominantly. We thought, well, that doesn't make sense. Half of Charleston is people of color, first of all. And second of all, we've got tons of awesome women-led businesses and women entrepreneurs here in Charleston. So let's explore how we can get them into our membership, into our directory here at Low Country Local First. So we launched a program called Good Enterprises that focuses on running nascent stage business owners and entrepreneurs through a 12-week community business academy. It's a $3,000 per student program. It's based on a program out of Rising Tide Capital from Jersey City, New Jersey. Every student is scholarshiped in, meaning it's virtually no cost to the student. And we support them by getting them an executive summary and making sure they have all the right connections to other marketing firms and resources and capital so that they're able to launch their business or improve their existing business. And again, these are primarily entrepreneurs of color or entrepreneurs who have been traditionally overlooked here in the Charleston area. But these sorts of programs like Good Enterprises are happening across the country, and I think they're a really exciting part of our work right now.
That's really exciting. And I love the intention behind everything that you just explained about. I think there's so much power in the intention that we have, especially as nonprofits and, just organizations serving your local community to, constantly be checking in with who are we serving and how are we serving them, or how could we serve them better? And it seems like you guys are super intentional about that. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
So my next question, you just answered a little bit of it, but we're going to expand upon it. So your work includes local economic development, training and support for local business owners, awareness and education efforts aimed at the general public, and advocacy for policies that recognize the importance of a strong, diverse local economy. In order to fulfill that mission, your organization focuses most of your efforts under three categories: good business, good enterprises, which you just mentioned, and good farming, as well as your advocacy efforts. So could you tell us more about each of these categories and how your work plays out in each of them?
Yeah, absolutely, Christy. And I appreciate these summaries of our work. I feel like it's the way you've described some of what we do and how we do it is honestly helping me sort of organize in my own head what we do and how we do it. Because there's so much, I feel like
That's my goal. That's my goal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're great questions. So yeah, happy to answer this one about taking a deeper dive into exactly our program areas and what they mean. I did talk a little bit about good enterprises, so I think I'll spend a little time fleshing out good business and good farming. So that's sort of the three-legged stool. So the other two stools, good business and good farming. Good business is it's basically it's our sort of identification of a need to support local independent businesses here in town, and it encompasses, that program is encompassed by everything that we do to support those businesses and bring those businesses together, to network, to do business with one another. And you mentioned sort of public awareness campaigns or messaging out to the public. Part of how we support those local independent businesses who are under that good business umbrella and therefore are part of our paying business community of paying members. part of what we do is remind the public through e-news blasts and social media posts and workshops and webinars and events, wherever and whenever we can, we want to educate our fellow Charlestonians as to why it's so important to purchase their goods and their food locally, if they can. One thing we tell them is when you spend $1 locally, 45 cents of that dollar stays in your local town, your local community. So it recirculates. It's a reinvestment in your community. Through taxes, it increases the tax base, so you get potholes filled in all around town. It increases, obviously, the quality of public education through taxes as well. But also, if your ownership lives in the town where you reside, that ownership gets the profits from your payments, and they are, research shows, much more likely to then reinvest either by donating to nonprofits or in some other way to their local community. So it's really a 1 + 1 = 3 situation, particularly when you choose to bank locally. Those banks also, research shows, those local community banks, if you have them in your town, maybe they're credit unions in your town or your county or your state, when you do business with them, when you open up accounts, whether they're banking accounts or personal accounts, you're not only supporting a local business, because local banks are local businesses, but those local financial institutions are more likely than some of the big guys, the Wells Fargos, the Bank of Americas, to reinvest in your community. So you'll see like actual impacts. They will finance public works projects and public parks, and there are beautification efforts that those folks will be behind, and they'll support and sponsor local athletic teams and little league squads. So that's another kind of way that things are improved by purchasing locally. You, of course, do all of the other great things that I'm sure your listeners know about. You're, supporting unique retailers and businesses that make your town or your little corner of the world unique and vibrant and representative of itself. You don't want to live ideally in an anywhereville USA, where you see the same chain stores and franchise restaurants. It's nice to be able to walk down a main street and see a bunch of your neighbors' businesses, because it feels unique and fun and funky and eccentric, but also because those local businesses are creating jobs in your community and are hiring your neighbors and your neighbors' neighbors and your families. And maybe they're running those businesses. So it's really cool to just support that spirit of entrepreneurism. And you can only do that by showing potential entrepreneurs that you are willing to support existing entrepreneurs in your community. So that's like a business program. And we, of course, provide benefits and resources. I'd encourage any of your listeners who are listening to explore whether there's local first organizations in their backyard, because there's always ways to, if you're a business owner particularly or associated with a local business, there's ways to get signed up for membership. And at least as far as Low Country Local First membership is concerned, when a business signs up for membership, they get a number of things, like a local first decal on the front of their store that shows folks they are in fact local. And then we've done research to show that people are 4 to 5 times more likely to shop in that store when they see it's certified local. So that's great. They also get onto our business directory, so local citizenry can see like, okay, I know it's important to shop local. I saw that e-blast from LLF, but let me just log in now to their directory and see which restaurants and stores and farmers actually are locally owned, and are actually able to engage in B2B interactions with other local stores and web designers and graphic designers and attorneys. Because keep in mind, franchises and big box stores, if they want a new logo or they want to change their colors or they want to start sourcing aluminum from this place rather than this place because it's maybe less expensive or closer, or there's a smaller carbon footprint, they can't just make those decisions. They have to usually interact with folks who live maybe in some cases hundreds and hundreds of miles away, states away, countries away. And usually the sorts of business to business partnerships that they're hatching are with businesses that are outside of your metro area. So that's another missed opportunity for what we call a multiplier effect. So if you can get businesses working with other businesses, both of whom are in your local metro center, you will see positive impacts from that as a citizen. So I know it's a little bit more expensive, but sometimes, not always, but usually there's a positive net effect there when you choose to patronize local businesses or partner with local businesses if you're a local business. Anyway, I'll quickly just mention, sorry, Christy, I'm going on and on.
It's not, please don't apologize, because I was going to say, I love the fact that you are breaking down every aspect of the benefit of shopping local in a way that we don't stop and think about. I mean, everything you just mentioned has not gone through my thought process at all. I mean, I understand the value of supporting local businesses, but just kind of on a basic level. I think you really just drove home how it all works and how it truly supports you and your community, and what a benefit it is. So don't apologize, please. Go
That's
on.
awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. I mean, it could feel like you're in a bit of an echo chamber, not just because I'm literally sitting in what looks to be a janitorial closet, but it's actually a phone booth in a co-working space that our organization runs. But you're around folks who, you talk about the same mission day in, day out, and as a nonprofit employee, occasionally it becomes, tough to gauge whether you're actually breaking through and whether people are resonating with your message. So that's great to hear. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this podcast to hopefully maybe expand some of our audience.
Sure.
I'd say the last leg of that three-legged stool is good farming, which has changed for us over the years. We talked about incorporating as a nonprofit about 15, 16 years ago. When we first started, that good farming component of our work was primary to our mission. And we were really focused on connecting farmers and agricultural organizations with interns and apprentices who wanted to either work on those farms or start their own local farms. So we've sort of shifted focus a lot from our roots in that way, but a lot of the work that we did to promote local farming and local farm ownership hasn't gone away. It's just rolled off to maybe other organizations. Like there's a community college here that teaches a discipline that we created. Excuse me. And that course is actually run by our former director of sustainability. So we're still seeing that work happen in the community. We've just pulled a little bit away from it as an organization. All of those farms that exist and do business here in the Low Country are welcome to be members of our sort of good business membership directory. And in fact, many farms, many consumer packaged goods, many food purveyors, many restaurants are part of our organization and are in contact with us and all of our other members and do benefit from membership in a lot of the ways that I had mentioned before.
That's fantastic. I just think it's awesome what you guys are doing and how many different varying ways you're tackling this. And so I'm curious about first your Good Business Summit and then also your local social that you host. Can you tell us more about the purpose of those events and how they work?
Yeah, of course. The Good Business Summit is a yearly event that we run. We're in our 10th annual year. It is an opportunity for us to bring a bunch of our constituents together. So by constituents, I mean really anyone that our work impacts, which is hopefully almost everyone. We've got business owners under one roof with maybe even climate activists or maybe elected representatives, folks from other nonprofits, aspiring business owners is a big chunk of our constituency or our audience. All of them come together under the same roof for one day in February every year. This year, it's at the Charleston Music Hall, which is right in the center of downtown Charleston. It's a nice, historic, aesthetically pleasing theater. We've got a couple of main stage keynote speakers and some panelists in the afternoon. And everything, programmatically speaking, centers around how folks can better pair profit with purpose. And so the Good Business Summit is an opportunity for us to sort of elevate some of the discussions we have about local independent business and explore ways local independent businesses of all shapes and sizes and industries can operate as stewards of their social environment and their physical environment. So how can we maybe source materials in a way that creates less pollution? Or how can we maybe it can be as simple as turn the lights down or use different light bulbs so that we have a smaller ecological footprint. Or socially speaking, how can we just be better stewards of our community? So maybe we are an employer through a pandemic, and though folks can't come in physically to our wine shop and work because we're closed down, maybe we find other innovative ways for them to provide some of their expertise in a digital format on our website. And by writing stories or posting blogs, we pay them while they're at home, and then knowing that they will come back into the shop eventually once hopefully this pandemic is over. And that was not just an example. I sort of tweaked some of the details there, but we have a really cool wine shop in town called Graft Wine Shop. It's a very tiny wine shop, had to shut down during COVID, but Femi Oyediran, who's the leadership there, the CEO and co-founder, he found really innovative ways to support his staff, even though they weren't able to come in because the town made him shut his wine shop down. So part of the summit is just highlighting and spotlighting and showcasing those workable solutions to make sure your business is operating really well if you're a small local business and you need support, but also to make sure your business is thinking about how it can be a better steward of our environment and of our community. And you can do that and increase your profit. I don't want to just sound like, like a bunch of, like I'm spouting off some hot air, Christy, when I say that. Like I do believe, and research shows, and if I had a million more hours, you can tell how long-winded I am, so I won't go into details, but suffice to say that there are ways to be a better business and do things that negatively impact the environment less and make more money. I mean, there is a return on investment case to be made for many decisions operationally in a business that will also improve the state of the surrounding community's natural resources. That's just a fact. Whether it's switching to solar, or it's looking at battery power, or it's encouraging folks to work from home rather than driving into the office and polluting on their way. And then there's other very esoteric specific examples as well. But there's tons of ways that businesses can improve their environment and their bottom line. And we try to also highlight some of those at the yearly Good Business Summit. The local socials, it's simple. That's just every month. It's an opportunity to bring our business owners, our entrepreneurs, our audience together to celebrate how everybody has found ways to shift their daily and monthly spending to local. And this year, we're theming out those socials a little bit. So we will have an environmental month. We'll have an artist and advocacy month. So people oftentimes forget that artists and musicians, I'm a musician myself. My wife's a poet. These folks have to be entrepreneurial as well. And they have to think about marketing and AdWords and all these like icky things for artists. Sometimes they've got to consider I think folks in the art sphere need to consider themselves to be entrepreneurs, to be business people, because they are. They sometimes are just wearing every hat, but it doesn't mean there isn't a marketing department under that, on one of those hats, or a design department, or someone who hatches partnerships, or someone who gets the certificates of insurance when they're going to be playing at a particular place. So there's a lot that goes in, or an accountant or an attorney, depending upon different deals that need to be signed. So there's a lot that goes into being an artist, and we want to highlight that during one month, and every month has its own little specific niche that we highlight. And so those are our local socials.
I love that. And I really appreciate the focus on just holding space for these type of conversations to happen within your community, right? Because you're giving people the opportunity to focus on these things and have the conversation and learn from each other. I especially really appreciate the conversation about purpose and profit. I love that conversation is really growing right now in our society as a whole, is that, you can still act in a purposeful way and simultaneously be focused on profit, and that's okay. I love that you're holding space for those kind of conversations. And on this podcast, I like to discuss with my guests the topics of compassion and community. So first, let's expand upon our conversation we've already had so far on community. How essential would you say it is to a community's vitality and strength that there be initiatives that inspire and motivate the community to work together?
Yeah, community is at the center of all we do. I would say at Low Country Local First. First off, I mean, we think about it in almost every discussion or project. First off, we are a community-based organization. And what I mean by that is we are literally anchored to a specific geographic location and the inhabitants of that location. Um, so there's different sort of like concentric circles of community, right? Like we want to, first and foremost, educate everyone in the Low Country. So that's the largest circle of community that we might be focused on at Low Country Local First as a local first advocacy organization. We want to make sure everybody in the Low Country understands the basic tenets of localism, which is to say, understands again why it's so important and how easy it can be to purchase local goods and to patronize local stores and restaurants. As you go down to smaller circles of community, we get a little bit more focus. So we also focus on the local independent business leaders. And as you mentioned, we want to create space for them and create opportunities for them to network and to share best practices and learn from one another. We also want to provide the opportunity for them to come to workshops that we curate the programming for, or the Good Business Summit. We want to try to create partnerships for them so that we can discount their shipping and their handling. We want to find out, to kind of go back to a couple questions ago, I never really spoke about advocacy, but we advocate for that community as well. So if those local independent business leaders come together and maybe on one of our annual surveys, all in concert declare that X, Y, or Z is a problem for them, then I, as the director of economic development, would turn to our elected representatives, either at council meetings or by signing petitions or by rallying folks together or setting up roundtables with mayoral candidates. And I try to ask the questions that matter to our members and pose some potential workable solutions or potential policy procedures that elected representatives can get behind. To be very clear about an example, we recently in town, not recently, a few years ago, started exploring, and this was Low Country Local First and a few other organizations, but was led by Lauren Gallatley, who's my predecessor, the former director of operations at LLF. We started exploring what's called formula business prohibition or formula business districts. And for your listeners who aren't familiar, and I wasn't familiar a few years ago until I joined LLF, but formula business districting is really interesting, and they should look into that because it's one way to ensure that certain areas or neighborhoods of your metro center or your county or your town are sort of set up to be specifically for only local independent businesses. So it's a way for us to preserve physical spaces in cities and towns for these really cool, quaint, neighbor-run local independent businesses that we're talking about. And then I know your listeners probably really love and maybe run themselves or thinking about starting. The way you do it is basically really archaic and esoteric and sort of boring, frankly, but I recommend they look into it. It's called formula business districting. You're essentially pulling certain levers, just the top line, sort of high level summary, provided an understanding. You're basically pulling different levers or encouraging policy folks and elected representatives to pull certain levers to create zoning legislation and statutes that are particularly advantageous to local businesses over chain businesses. So it's not like you're saying a Costco can't open up here, but you're maybe saying if a Costco doesn't fit into X, Y, and Z buckets from a zoning perspective, it won't be able to fit in here. Instead, you'll have this local market, and you'll have maybe this local supermarket, and you'll have X, Y, and Z other stores instead eventually. So that's one thing we do for that community. Yeah, and communities are just at the heart of all we do. Our most recent, every month or season or quarter or year, we're always thinking about maybe a new community that we can re-engage with or engage with for the first time. So just to put a bow on this answer, I'll go back to our Good Enterprises program, which focuses on graduating students through the Community Business Academy. That community is filled with entrepreneurs who have been traditionally overlooked. They've got businesses or want to start businesses, but maybe don't have the resources or networks they need. So again, we run them through this crash course. We set them up with some of the things that they need. It's a weekly, night course. A lot of these folks already have jobs, but they're looking to start their side project. Maybe it's a cupcake business or a landscaping services business. And then we graduate them after the 12 weeks, and we bring our larger community out in addition to the community's friends and family, and we celebrate them, and we play pomp and circumstance like you might hear at a high school graduation. And we have keynote speakers, and we provide diplomas and have folks take photos. And this is a completely free to the entrepreneur program, including the graduation. And then there's food and drink. And if there's food or drink entrepreneurs as part of that community who have just graduated, we encourage them to set up in an auxiliary hall afterwards, and people can kind of taste and sample some of their food or purchase some of their food, better yet. So that's just one more community that we focus on. I hope that answered your question. I know your question was about community, and I just took it and ran with
totally. And it's so fantastic and sort of blowing my mind how many different programs you have running, how many different ways your organization is supporting local entrepreneurs, local businesses. I mean, it is just, it's literally like overwhelming me in a good way that I really didn't know that there was that much depth to what you're doing. So absolutely. Thank you for sharing all that.
No problem. We're probably doing too much. I mean, it's occurring to me, we should probably focus on less. And
this is perfect. And quite frankly, the interview process here on this podcast is supposed to be you mainly talking, me and the listeners listening. So you're doing great. Now let's talk about compassion. Can you tell us what your own definition of compassion is and how you see compassion as it relates to the work that you do with Low Country Local First?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really good question. I wish I had given it more thought, frankly. But as you're asking, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I think there's a lot of overlap between my own definition and the organizations. Maybe it differs a little bit. I think my own is just very broad. And my own, I think, in the organizations focuses on respect. I think a respectful, identification of an obstacle or a problem or a poison or an injustice that someone else is experiencing, probably in one's own community. This person is probably from one's own community. Identifying that, and then also, sometimes the compassion just ends at the identification of it. You don't necessarily want to swoop in and solve other people's problems, but to me, I think compassion doesn't always end, but certainly starts at identifying respectfully, or at least acknowledging that there might be some pain or negative circumstances that someone close to you is experiencing. It could be your friends, family, or community members you don't even know. And then making space for that certainly has to come next. And if you are in a position to ally with that individual, or ally or align with potential solutions, or even salves, right? It doesn't need to be a solution. It could just be something that helps the person or community for a time. Then I think being a part of that is also important. So that's definitely a really, again, circuitous, long-winded definition you won't find in Webster's dictionary. A, because isn't compassion, but B is probably just way too long to fit on the page. And also C, I'm sort of, as you can tell, processing a little bit in the moment because I want to make sure I get it right. It's such an important thing. But maybe there's no right definition, right? It's probably why you asked.
There isn't. I was going to say, I first of all, love that answer. I love that answer. It might be one of the best answers I've had to that question.
Oh, I don't know that.
And two, I do ask that question because everybody has their own beautiful, unique answer to that question. And I think sometimes with certain words, as you mentioned, the dictionary, certain words have a definition. And we take that as that defines what that word is. But when you dig into it and you start to ask people how they interpret that word, you realize that the word has so much more depth and meaning, than at surface you think it does. So that answer really did just go there for me. And I love too asking, like, how does it relate to the work that you do, which you really explained that well. Because again, it also expands the definition because it's unique to each, type of work that all of my guests are doing. And everybody
Yeah.
that I do interview on this show, I would say is absolutely community and compassion driven, which is why I stick to those themes. But I think it's fun to hear all the different ways that people explain it. So thank you for that. And can
Sure.
you tell us how listeners can get involved in supporting low country, local first? I knew at one point I was going to mess that up.
It's okay.
Didn't
Never.
come till the end. Didn't come to
No,
the
that's
end.
all right.
Tell us how we can get involved and support you, and then how can we best follow along? Give us the website, the social handles, and all of that.
Sure, absolutely. So folks can, regardless of where they may reside, if it is in South Carolina, awesome. Definitely check out lowcountrylocalfirst.org. If there are some events on our events page that you want to travel over to and check out, please sign up for those, register for those. We've got a live podcast coming up at Queen Street Playhouse in downtown Charleston, which is going to be a really fun event. It's
That's
something that we're
fun.
trying for the first time ever. It's going to be broadcast to a local radio station in real time, and I'm going to be interviewing some folks up on stage, and there'll be people in the audience physically as well. So a lot of moving parts. Who knows? That could be absolutely insane in all the right and wrong ways, or it could be perfectly great and everything that we hope and expect it to be. I don't know. It's sort of a mixed bag. I think it's going to be really exciting, but more on that to come. But we have plenty of other events as well. We've got local socials, like I mentioned, and also digital services like local expertise exchange. So for really busy business owners, and as people who don't live here listening to this is something you can either create in your own community, or maybe it already exists. So I'd encourage you to see if there's some counterpart in your own town or county. The local expertise exchange is basically just a Google form, to be quite frank, that we encourage our members to fill out. And the whole point of the expertise exchange is to connect folks from our community who want to provide a service with folks who are looking for a specific service. So I may be a law firm and I want to change up my website, excuse me, but I don't know where to begin. I don't know up from down, left from right. Well, we'll connect you in with some local web design company to do a 1 hour, no obligation, totally free discussion. Not really a consultation. They're just kind of having a discussion, and hopefully there'll be a personal relationship that flourishes, and they'll be able to kind of work together in the future. If a professional collaboration doesn't come out of that beyond the 1 hour, like that's totally fine. Again, it's no obligation. It's not about necessarily creating a commercial transaction. It's just about getting folks in the local independent business ecosystem friendly with one another and providing a little bit of free, experience. Who doesn't need a little bit of free help every once in a while? We think that's really important. So check us out if you live locally. If you don't live locally, check out your local first organization near you. If you're in Arizona, there's Local First Arizona. That's one of the big ones. There's Local First Cambridge. If you're in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there's Local First organizations everywhere. I'd recommend you check it out. If you're interested in localism in general, if anything I've said has like sparked an interest in you today and you hadn't really thought about it before, you can also read some of the literature from some of the organizations who are talking about this sort of work, like philosophically or high level, or doing work on the federal level to actually change policies that become advantageous for local businesses, to help local businesses proliferate. That's a hard word, proliferate.
That is.
I'll say it again wrong. Yeah, so check out ILSR, which is the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And there's other organizations like Amoeba, AMIBA. They're also an alliance of organizations that think about a lot of this. So there's a lot of ways to tap into this work and get yourself aligned with it. Also, I'd recommend starting a local business, or looking at how you might be able to start even a side hustle or a side business. Maybe some of your listeners have something like that already. That's great. I was just listening to NPR this morning, and like we've got a huge lion's share of the new job creation is coming from these small businesses that are starting up, which has not been the case in the 2010s. So the 2020s are looking a lot like the 90s and a little bit like the 80s, where local businesses, or small businesses rather, small to medium-sized businesses are the reason for massive job growth and a lot of job opportunities, which is great. It used to be a lot of like huge corporations consolidating, and then you had a lot of these like tiered the jobs cropping up. But now there's sort of almost a flattening and a democratization of job opportunities, and they're coming from a wide range of really exciting, varied, entrepreneur-led operations, which is cool. A lot of them are startups as well. So we'll see what happens with the economy in the next couple of years, but that's definitely an interesting trajectory. So yeah, I'd encourage folks to check out Low Country Local First. We have social media, we have all those good things. I'm not our director of marketing. I'm not sure exactly the handles. I would just look
I
up
was
Low
going to
Country
say,
Local.
don't worry. I will actually add that all to the show notes.
Okay,
And
cool.
really anything that you've mentioned, they should easily be able to find on the website, and I'll add that as well.
Okay, cool.
So,
and I would just encourage folks to check out the Good Business Summit as well if they want to come check that out. Charleston Music Hall, February 9th. It's an all-day conference. It's worth flying in for. The tickets are super low this year. We've done that very purposefully. Like, we're losing money on the tickets, to be quite frank. We're fundraising obviously in other ways through sponsorships, et cetera, and partnerships. But the tickets are right now $55. They start at $55. And that's an all-day conference. If you work for a local independent business, or you're thinking about working for one, or you lead one, or are thinking about leading one, and that's like most people, and you're maybe on the Eastern Seaboard or in the general region of South Carolina, come on down or come on up if you're in Florida or Georgia. Check it out. It's going to be a really fun day. And that $55 gets you breakfast, lunch, a drink at happy hour, and the full day of programming. Plus, you're in a really cool city.
That's fantastic. And I will say, though, they're probably not going to make it for this one because this episode won't come out in time.
Oh, okay.
But
so
this is an annual
yes.
event, correct?
Yes.
So
yes.
I
So
think
February 2024. Think about it now.
I was going to say, start thinking about it now, start planning, look into it, because it sounds like an incredible event. And I just can't thank you enough for being here and for all of the incredible work the organization is doing, but also how well you broke everything down for us that really made it digestible and inspiring. It was incredibly inspiring, I think, for anybody listening to get involved locally in their own area and to maybe start working on some of these initiatives that you've already kind of created this blueprint for. It's really powerful work. So thank you so much for being here, Steve. And everybody check out Low Country Local First.
Thank you so much, Christy. This was a pleasure and a privilege, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to chat with your listeners about it.